Chapter 1. The sun came out as they headed down Victoria Terrace, the green bump of Victoria Park rising ahead of them, and beyond it the city of Bristol. If anything, the sun made the morning colder, the grey, wintry light sharpening the features of the park and trees. Yet Mitchell noticed George still beamed at the warmth on his face. Mitchell scowled. Sunlight made him itchy, brought him out in a rash. He dug in the pockets of his leather jacket for a cigarette. George obviously took that to mean something. He stopped, turning to look at Mitchell. Mitchell stopped too, cupping a hand round the end of the cigarette as he lit it, protecting it from the breeze. He inhaled a long lungful of smoke, then exhaled through his nose with a sigh. "What?" he asked George, who was still watching him, his head cocked on one side, set in one of his sympathetic faces. "I'm sure it's going to be fine," George told him. "Sure," said Mitchell, shrugging. They started to walk again, Mitchell as ever just in front, George trotting behind. "New guy running the hospital, poking around, asking questions. What could possibly go wrong? We don't know what he's here for. It's probably just money, efficiency, savings. Redundancies," said Mitchell. "Ah, come on, that's the bright side." "Well, yeah, it's not great," said George, "but you know what it's like these days. Redundancies would be normal, and normal's good." Mitchell shook his head, laughing. But when he spoke, he was perfectly serious. "We need these jobs, George," he said. "We need the hospital." George opened his mouth to say something, then reconsidered. He tried to say something else, then considered again. Finally, he just said, "I know." They needed the hospital because it kept them normal. They were part of a community, a small part of the mass of humanity. It wasn't glamorous. They were just porters, doing the jobs anyone else could get out of. But it meant they were paying something back, making an act of contrition. Mitchell had got the idea from a thing in the paper about Alcoholics Anonymous. This guy talked about how difficult it was living an ordinary life when you were an addict. You felt separate and dirty and self-conscious, adrift from the rest of humanity. Mitchell knew exactly how that felt. So the AA sometimes got new awkward members to go round after a session and clear up all the ashtrays. It was a dirty, smelly job. There'd be cigarette butts on the floor, under chairs, and you'd have to dig them out with your fingers. You'd be there on your knees, down in the muck and ash. And you felt, for a moment, normal. Blessedly mundane. A little humility and care for others, and you could maybe buy back your soul. Running errands round the hospital gave Mitchell and George that same sense of regaining grace. But there were other practical reasons for wanting to stay at the hospital. George needed the old isolation ward down in the bowels of the building, a vault with a sturdy door. Once a month he could lock himself in there. The wolf was free to wreak havoc, and no one could get hurt. Mitchell, too, had access to packets and packets of blood, which didn't really work, but just about kept him from feasting on anyone walking past. It was the perfect place for them, living among the humans, invisible, and doing no one any harm. "They won't sack porters," said George, as they crossed the road and followed the pavement running alongside the river. "They don't pay us enough for it to make a difference." Mitchell exhaled a long plume of smoke. He didn't need to say it, but he wasn't just worried about whether they'd keep their jobs. They kept on in silence, down York Road, the river on their right. The sun glittered on the water in the Avon, and in the windows of the gentrified buildings on the bank. Nothing ever stayed the same. Bristol had transformed in the years Mitchell had known it. This smart, pretty marina had once been thick with smoke and activity, ships crowded into every available landing. Bristol had made its fortune in trade, in silks and spices and even human beings. It had been a nexus point, a gateway into Britain, or out to the rest of the world, which is why the vampires had chosen it. They had run the city invisibly for centuries. There were vampire customs men, dockers and magistrates. They had their own people in the